Afternoon, educators. Hello, welcome to Pearson Edexcel updates for school leaders. Okay, my name is Ali Al-Jufri, and I believe that some of you have met me before, have known me before. And along with Prasasti, my manager, which she's not here today, we are actually responsible for Pearson Edexcel in Indonesia. Pearson Edexcel is a UK curriculum program. So we serve schools with curriculum, exams, as well as resources based on UK curriculum. Along with Pearson Edexcel, we are also promoting our program called Pearson Assured. This is our quality assurance program. We are proud of these two programs, and Pearson Edexcel and Pearson Assured are now the leading programs that schools are very much interested in. And the other reason why we are proud of this program, because we know that we provide quality supports for schools, educators, teachers to grow as institutions and also as schools adopting the UK curriculums. And we receive a lot of questions from schools, from you, about how to be a better school in general, okay, and also how to be SPK schools in specific, and to cater to those needs, to show our supports to you. We are holding this event this afternoon, and we invite PSSI, represented by Ibu Haifa, okay, and also As Consulting, represented by Oliver. Okay, so I call them Ibu Haifa and Oliver because we actually work together a lot, right, Ibu? So later on, if you have questions about being SPK schools, please direct your questions via Ibu Haifa to Ibu Haifa. You can type your questions first via chat box, okay, and I will make sure that Ibu Haifa address those questions. And Ollie's session later, Ollie will talk about something more general. It's about how to make your schools much better as institutions, right, Ollie? Okay, so without further ado, we're going to start with Ibu Haifa. Ibu Haifa, I believe you can introduce yourself and also talk a little bit about PSSI as well as what you can do to the schools, right? Ibu Haifa, time is yours.
Okay, thanks, Ali. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a privilege to be invited and meet everyone here. I can see my longtime friend, Pak Chris. Hello, Pak. So, yeah, thank you. I hope today's session give you a lot of insight about what is SPK schools and how I can reach to that destination. So a little bit about myself. My name is Haifa Seger. I'm the chairperson for Perkumpulan Sekolah SPK Indonesia. SPK stands for Satuan Pendidikan Kerjasama, and I'm representing New Zealand School in Jakarta. It's located in Kemang, South Jakarta. So now I would like to just give a little bit about SPK School in the next 1 hour, and then Oliver is gonna continue with the strategies. So I'm gonna share screen now. So I'm gonna do this in bilingual, yes. So campur with bahasa, so everyone can have a better understanding, because some of the regulation is pretty Indonesian specific. So I just don't want to have a misleading information about the regulation. So a little bit about myself. I'm starting really in education from SPK school, joining one of the biggest group of schools back in 2005. So I've been in SPK school for more than 15 years. So this is this is what I want everyone to achieve by attending my session, having the right understanding about the regulation, the type of collaboration, and understanding requirements. And also, it's a sharing session. Hopefully, we can share. So this is just the background of the regulation around Ebitda that really is like something to hold into. I'm gonna explain a little bit, not all because we don't have enough time, a little bit about this regulation. So there are two types of Ebitda according to regulation. One is management or pengelolaan, and the other one is operation or penyelenggaraan. So those who's probably already aware, most of Ebitda school, if not all, is basically fall under management category. So, which means it's basically almost all aspects in Ebitda schools, basically in collaboration with LPA. Whoever the LPA is gonna be chosen by the school. And the other side is the operation, which is basically something that can be seen as a new options. So only one of the aspect in the school that can be choose to basically have a collaboration with foreign education institution. So this is the one of the, so if you can see on the left, there are academic, non-academic, and what are the requirements. So basically, this is what you need to put in the MOU between the LPE and LPA. Make sure that you choose the right collaboration that is actually suitable for your particular school condition. So what are the key requirements? Apa sih? I was receiving a preliminary heads up by Ali because some of you already have questions about this. So that's why I just go directly to this, because a lot of people probably wants to understand what it takes to be an Ebitda school. So in terms of curriculum, it has to be two. So you cannot choose one. It has to be two. So one is obviously a national curriculum. If you ask why I want to be an Ebitda school, why I have to teach a national curriculum? Well, actually, you don't have to offer all. So only 3 compulsory subjects that you have to offer. So this is not a choice. This is something that you have to do. So you have to offer agama, right? And this agama, I know a lot of schools probably asking, how many agama lessons that I have to provide? Well, it depends on how many religion your students have. So for instance, you have all 5, then you have to offer all 5. And then after that, you have to teach Bahasa Indonesia. Being in this country, obviously, you need to learn the language, right? Some of the students, even though they are Indonesian national, but they were actually raised abroad, they don't really have an understanding in the language. This is something that you have to offer. And then after that, it's PPKN, or a lot of people call it civics. And bearing in mind that these 3 compulsory subjects, you have to teach this as separate subject. You cannot combine with any subject in your own curriculum. So you need to have a separate subject with separate teachers for these 3 compulsory subjects. And then for foreign curriculum, regardless what kind of curriculum you're gonna adapt, make sure that you at least offer 3 subjects. Usually it's math, science, and English. That's basically the 3 that most schools is taking on board, but feel free to offer even more, and this is just a minimum. And then goes to the next requirements, which is the faculty member. And this is extremely important because relating to the accreditation, which I'm gonna explain a little bit more at the end. This is why SPK school is struggling in meeting the requirements, because it's not only, it's pretty specific in terms of qualification, it's also quite difficult for SPK schools to be able to achieve this qualification. So one is obviously the degree. I'm sure this is not going to be a problem. A lot of private school already have these requirements anyway in their recruitment. And then for expatriates, make sure that they have at least 5 years minimum experience. And this is experience that is related to their teaching position. And then certification. This will be divided into category. One is for your national teachers, and the other one is for foreign teachers. So the certification for foreign teachers will be attached to the LPA. So which means if you actually a Pearson Edexcel Center, just make sure that your foreign teachers have the certificate from Pearson to be able to meet these requirements. And for your national teachers, harus sertifikasi ya. Ini actually relate to sertifikasi. And I understand that to have that certification process is not easy because it depends on the quota, because it's basically organized by the regulation, and sometimes they don't really have enough access for private sector more to SPK schools. And then for principal or academic coordinator, minimum master degree and certified principal and teachers. And then for non-teaching position or support staff, a lot of different terms, just make sure that this is the minimum. So what I'm explaining here is the minimum. So you need to have librarian, laboratory assistant, teaching resources technician, administration, and cleaning and security. And then on the limitation, this is also that I need to highlight a maximum 70% for foreign teachers, a maximum 20% for foreign non-teaching position. And then for English teachers, make sure that either they are a native English, coming from native English speaking countries, or they have a certification. And then just one more, and when I cannot hold HR position. Okay, for assessment, it used to be requirements to attend the national exam. But since national exam is no longer in the picture, they are looking at national assessment, which is not finalized yet. Tadinya namanya AKM, sekarang jadi AN, dan belum final ya, karena masih ditunda. And we're still waiting for the government to come up with the new terms. And then for LPA, well, obviously you need to have both national and LPA. So just make sure at the end of each level, depends on LPA, assuming for Pearson Edexcel is on grade 6 and 10 and grade 12. And then for financing, this is also something that you have to take note, that by becoming an SPK school, you're no longer entitled to receive BOS. So if you're currently receiving BOS, if you change your status to be SPK school, you're not gonna be getting this anymore. And that's also apply for your teacher. They will not be eligible to get tunjangan sertifikasi. So make sure before you decide to take the route, and this is gonna be the consequences. And then the next requirements is the quality assurance, which is basically people call it like accreditasi, right? Gimana maintain your quality. For national, obviously, is gonna be BAN organizing that, Badan Akreditasi Nasional. And then you have to get a national accreditation to be able to convert the status to be an SPK school. And once you are an SPK school, you will then have to go through another accreditation process, which is for the SPK. And then on top of that, international program, you need to have also the quality assurance. I divided it to two categories. The other one is the authorization or accreditation. Basically, this is at the beginning of you becoming a center, once you're becoming a center, and then after that, the quality assurance needs to be done regularly. Like you're probably already aware that Pearson have this in place. Just make sure that you have everything well documented. And then after that, professional development, this is something that a requirement as well. Make sure that you have a regular PD schedule. And why I put this is probably not something you will see in Permendikbud 31 as one of the main regulation, but this is gonna be the requirements in SPK accreditation. So having an early understanding on what's gonna be the requirements will equip you to have a full preparation to be an SPK school. And then again, teaching certification is something that is really important for you to have and make sure that all your teachers have this. And then requirement for students, for foreign students, they need to be registered because some have the understanding it's only applicable for NE. So foreign students needs to have NESN as well. And then on top of that, all foreign students needs to have a study permit. And for Indonesia, obviously, used to be a national exam for grade 9 and 12, and now it's gonna change to national assessment, even though by regulation is still mentioned. And then for teaching and learning process, this is basically a paperwork administration, but I understand that by becoming a Pearson Edexcel Center, you have everything in place already. Just make sure that you have this in place, well recorded. So if it's time for you to go through the accreditation process, you can show this to the assessor. So in terms of facilities, obviously, SPK school are expected to have better facilities in terms of support teaching and learning. And this is the minimum requirements that you need to have in your campus. If it's not on land, make sure that you have a minimum 6 years lease and it has to be notarized. And then the library has to be with digital facilities to access learning resources, multimedia room, communication and IT system for administration, clinic, a praying room, and bilingual signage. Some of this is actually an accreditation requirements. And then for administration, this is basically a paperwork that you need to put in place to apply for the license. So you're gonna need recommendation from the local Dignas. You need to have your feasibility study, obviously MOU with Pearson, bank reference, rancangan induk pengembangan sekolah, and then specialization general plan atau tata ruang. And then after that, for management, this is the two type of SPK that I mentioned in the beginning. You need to also have a recommendation, feasibility study, and MOU. And then in terms of reporting, since you will need to access OSS, those who's not familiar, is online single submission. It's a new system introduced by Pak Jokowi to basically centralize the license process. So you need to have LKPM, which is a regular quarterly reports. And after that, annually, you need to access e-layanan organized by Kemdikbud. So one of the key things that you need to understand, the LPR, it has to be those who's registered at MOE. You cannot choose those yourself if it's not registered with MOE. And then the new regulation, in fact, earlier before this event, this session, I just had a meeting with MOE that they currently reviewing the SPK regulation. So they currently reviewing the amendment for Permendikbud 31, and one of the key thing is going to be on the new regulation is basically the list of LPR that you can choose. You can see number 34, Pearson is already listed as one of the registered LPR. Okay, so one of the key things for the accreditation of SPK is the international accreditation. So if you are internationally accredited, so not only national, you have advantage in terms of skipping some of the requirements, which I'm gonna explain. So this is, as of today, only this 6 international accreditation body is acknowledged by Badan Akreditasi Nasional. As you can see also, Pearson Assured Accreditation is also listed. So from my point of view, it's kind of really one package, this Pearson, not only you get the program and the curriculum and all the teaching resources, but you can also access the accreditation platform to basically meet all the requirements. So what's actually the difference? Because this is also one of the questions that Ali sent it to me. What is the difference between the national accreditation and SPK accreditation? So I'm not gonna explain one by one because I'm conscious of time, but this is basically an overview of what actually the difference between the national accreditation and SPK. So for SPK accreditation, there are 39 points that is assessed by BAN for SPK school. So the first one, they call it syarat mutlak, which is number 1 to number 15. This syarat mutlak is basically all the requirements in Permendikbud 31, which means without this, you're not an SPK school. Obviously, you need an MOU, right? And then you need to provide the evidence that you actually offer the 3 compulsory subjects and Indonesian studies for WNA. And then you also provide evidence that you taught minimum 3 subjects from foreign curriculum. You own the land and building, if not lease for minimum 6 years and it's notarized. And one of the things that even though it's not in the regulation, is mentioned in the key condition in the accreditation. You cannot operate inside the mall or you cannot operate inside a vehicle. And then the composition of teaching and non-teaching staff, that 70-30, 20-80 ratio, it needs to be in place. And then you need to have RIPS, Rencana Induk Pengembangan Sekolah. So all this is going to be verified even before the visit. So if you didn't meet one of these syarat mutlak, your school is not going to be visited. And then after that, it goes to the syarat umum. They call it syarat umum, which is the 16 to 29 points. And looking at the international accreditation that I mentioned, if you have that, for instance, you already have that Pearson assured accreditation, you don't have to fulfill number 16 to 21, which is basically about the program. So you can go directly to point 22, which is really, really significant in terms of deciding what's gonna be your result. So I strongly suggest you have this in place before the actual SPK accreditation. And then obviously assessment by LPA, internal quality assurance, the infrastructure and facilities, continuous development program, the qualification of the teachers, and your principals, and then the participation of the exam. And they also want to see your school nationalism. It's probably not a good terms to say it, but I will say it anyway. So they want to see, because SPK school is perceived as too international, and sometimes it's kind of disregard the nationalism, you know, the photos of the president, the Garuda and Pancasila, and sometimes this is really something that they want to look at as well. And then the last thing that they're gonna see, which is on point 30 until 39, is basically the teaching and learning process. And they will only focus on the 3 compulsory subjects, assuming the LPA already have the quality assurance system in place. That's why it's really crucial to make sure that you have that standard in place, working together with Pearson. And then this is basically the understanding of the difference in terms of the instrument, because the national accreditation also have a new instrument. Even though I'm not a master in national accreditation, because I'm more to SPK accreditation, you can see that SPK have more instrument than national, because the expectation by becoming SPK school is gonna be higher. So they're gonna expect you to have even more quality compared to the national school. It's the same instrument for all levels. For national accreditation, for instance, SD have a different instrument, SMP, also SMA have a slightly different instrument. For SPK, it applies for all, except for PAUD. PAUD have a different instrument, because the band is different. It's not SM, it's PAUD PNF. And the scoring, you can see, is a lot higher. Not to mention the indicator is higher, but the end result is also higher. For instance, in order for you to get A, you need to have at least 96 points. That's really high. I mean, for national, even 91, you already have A. So a lot of schools get like 95, they get B, which is kind of frustrating, because 95 is quite high in terms of achievement, but that's the expectation. Okay, so moving forward, before I hand it over to Oliver, I'm probably gonna entertain some of the questions before. So this is something that you need to have in mind on, you know, after me explaining to you about the requirements, about how it takes to be an SPK school and the expectation. This is really crucial to make sure that you're actually ready. Not only you want it, but the condition of your school is actually ready to go to the next level, because it attached to a lot of things. Not just changing the license, is far more than that. This is something that you need to have in place, and which Oliver is going to explain in more details later on. You need to have planning, obviously. You cannot just, okay, I'm going to decide, I'm going to be SPK school next month. No, I don't think it's going to work like that. It needs a proper planning. You need to strategize. It also depends on the budget, because it's actually costly. It's becoming SPK school is quite costly in terms of a lot of things because the expectation is high. Obviously, the preparation is going to be more, and the implementation is also going to take a lot of time and resources. Of course, identifying your LPR, I'm sure you already identified by now by attending this session. So it's really important for you to work with your LPR and make sure that everything is in place. And then preparation, obviously. I understand that some of LPR need certain time to basically check whether you actually have all the standards to implement their program and curriculum. And that can take from as quick as 4 weeks to over 2 years because some of LPR actually have a very long process to be able to authorize one school to offer the program. So of course that preparation will take time. And then the implementation of requirements. So unfortunately, it cannot be done in parallel. So you need to implement all the requirements before you actually apply for a license. So make sure all these requirements is in place. It's really crucial before you actually start the process for the licensing. And then the application process, actually the application process is probably the simplest process because the longer process is basically preparation of the requirements and the implementation. And once you have all that, you basically only access online and upload documents. So OSS, you need to have the account. I'm sure some of you already have it, and that's gonna be your platform to apply for an SPK license in the beginning. Once you have what they call izin belum effective, so meaning you need to fulfill the commitment, they call it pemenuhan komitmen, which basically the requirements, and you have to access e-layanan after that, uploading all the documents, because everything, almost everything, except probably recommendation that you need to process in your local government, Pemda, Dinas setempat, it depends on your level. For instance, biasanya, if it's SMA, you have to go to province. If it's SD, SMP, you just go to kota. And then usually it's still done manually and it's still done offline. But I understand that some of the regional area already have that also online. And then after that, of course, verification process and school visit. So all the documents that has been uploaded is going to be verified. And this is sometimes it takes really long because it probably not in the same format. It probably have issue downloading, or the documents is not completed. It doesn't have all the requirements in place. So make sure that you actually have everything in place before even start the application process. And then once they're happy with your documents, they will visit your school, and the schedule can be so sudden. For instance, they can just inform you today and they're gonna visit tomorrow. So make sure again you are ready. Don't wait until they call you and they want to visit, and just make sure, regardless the dates they're gonna visit, you have everything in place already. And then, of course, all this thing is already in place. You get your license, but unfortunately, it's not end the process. The license, unfortunately, even though the regulation said your license basically valid as long as you're still in operation, but up until now, they're still issuing the license for 6 years. So, which means after you get your license, after that, you still have to go through the SPK accreditation. Again, after you've done your national, and it's time for you to do another different level of accreditation. to get your license renewed. Okay, so I'm already overload you with a lot of requirements, and I'm sure everyone already shoot a lot of questions. I'm just gonna hand it over to Ali before the next session. Ali, I think I have to choose probably which one. Can you just give me direction which one?
Thank you, Ibu, for the presentation. Right now, we don't have questions yet from the participants in the chat box, but maybe you would like to ask directly to Ibu Haifa. Please feel free to unmute yourself and then ask the questions. But previously, Ibu, like what we have discussed earlier, we had a lot of questions, right, from the schools. I think you almost answered all of them, Ibu. Okay.
Ini ada yang, it seems like there's someone give me a direct message. Let me.
Perhaps, okay, because I cannot see it in the public chat here.
Okay, so how we can get Pearson certificate? Is that test? How much we should spend for it? I think that's your questions for you, Ali.
Yes.
It's not for me. So maybe you can answer that. How to get that Pearson certificate?
Yes, I believe what the whoever asked the question would refer to the Pearson Assured program, Ibu. So like what Ibu Haifa has explained during her session as well as on the slide. So basically, Pearson Edexcel and also Pearson Assured accreditation have been acknowledged by Indonesian education system. This is a good news for us because we will be a lot more confident to actually serve you with the both products, the curriculum as well as the Pearson Assured accreditation. Our Pearson Assured accreditation actually comprises of several steps, Bapak Ibu. So if you apply for the Pearson Assured accreditation process, then we will provide sessions for you, 6-hour sessions for consultation. Basically, we will bring in our consultant to your school online, of course, these days, and then our consultant will break down in details about the Pearson Assured requirements, and then help schools to understand what those requirements are and also how to achieve those points. This 6-hour consultation actually prepare schools so that they are ready for the assessment with our UK assessor. So if everything is okay, then the application will be emailed to UK, and then we will appoint somebody from UK to have the assessment on Pearson Assured with your school. So once you are assured, then there will be a certificate issued for your school stating that your organization has been assured by Pearson. If you would like to know more about this, please do feel free to contact me. I believe most of you know my number and also emails already, but I will also leave it in the chat box. So that's one answer, Ibu Haifa. And then we actually have some questions on the chat box. We have Pak Chris. Bu Haifa, can you access the chat box? Can you read the question in the chat box?
Yeah, bisa.
Yes. Okay.
Does the principal must have the NRKS, and about the teacher certification, is there any minimal percentage or must be all? Jawaban yang pertama, iya Pak. That's why ini saya kasih tips. Sometimes it's a lot easier to have kepala sekolahnya asing because the national requirements nggak harus ikut. Karena if your kepala sekolah is local, all the national requirements attached to kepala sekolah harus ikut. That's make things a bit difficult lah. Harus diklat penguatan dulu, harus punya ini NRKS, harus ini. Makanya a lot of ini sebenarnya there's a questions also that you forwarded, Ali, that I haven't really addressed, so I'm gonna read as well. Jadi harus, so all the requirements attached to kepala sekolah, rather other than dari Permendikbud 31 ya, about having a master degree, teacher certificate, and kepala sekolah requirements. If your kepala sekolah is local, everything attached to requirements as kepala sekolah nationally you have to have. And then teacher certification, ini minimal percentage maksudnya apa ya Pak Kris?
Buat di awal Bu Haifa, ya kan tadi syarat sebagai faculty kan gurunya harus sertifikasi nih. Kan kita
Oke. Apa harus 100% gitu?
Iya, betul. Apa
Oke.
sebagian boleh?
Sebenarnya it will kayak national accreditation. So kalau semua poinnya maksimal, ya kan? Misalnya bisa dapat 4, kalau cuma 75% ya poinnya turun. Sebenarnya nggak harus dibilang 100% ya, tapi it will have effect on your points nantinya. So the more teachers you certified, lebih bagus nanti nilainya. Gitu. Terus ada lagi, how much is the Pearson Certification? Ali, your question aku skip dulu ya.
Ya Ibu, please address the question about aspect.
Oke, ini ada Pak Kris lah. Ya,
later.
nanti Pearson harus jawab itu yang Pearson specific I cannot answer, so that's Ali. Is there minimal student that must take the international exam? Well, actually, Pak, all your students needs to take the exam. I know that's the problem because some parents doesn't want to pay the exam fee. Saya tahu. So that's one of the consequences. By becoming SPK school, you need to understand that all the students needs to sit for the exam. Nggak ada pilihan. So nanti kalau nggak semua, again, poinnya akan turun. So if you ready to receive less points, then silahkan. I think parents needs to be educated as well lah. Buat apa sekolahin anak ke SPK kalau nggak mau ikutin semua, ya kan? Kan sayang, udah following the curriculum tapi nggak sit for the exam.
Ibu Haifa, can I jump in a little? Can I add some more information?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that you mentioned how we should also educate parents. Bapak Ibu, if you're familiar with our package, so our Pearson Edexcel package includes parents meeting. Seperti tadi yang Ibu Haifa bilang ya, pasti parents akan bertanya kenapa kita harus ikut ujian gitu kan, kenapa tidak hanya bisa ikut kurikulumnya, and so on and so on. We believe schools can explain that, tapi kami juga menyediakan consultation to parents. So silakan nanti kalau sudah menjadi mengadopsi Pearson Edexcel, then work with us. We will arrange the parents meeting. I believe some of you here already experienced that parents meeting that I'm talking about. Ya, silakan lanjut Ibu.
Okay, so sekarang I'm gonna read the question that you forward Ali before the session.
Okay.
Ini ada satu syarat 13 dari e-layanan, hasil studi kelayakan yang memuat A, B, C, D. Apakah ada contoh? Nggak ada Bapak Ibu, nggak dikasih contoh sama Kemdikbud, bikin sendiri. Jadi, the only thing that probably I can say is just make sure yang points per points itu semua ada di dokumen. Nggak harus ada template, unfortunately nggak ada. Itu yang sebenarnya I've been asking MOE lah. Lebih enak kalau kita ada format yang harus diikuti, jadi kita tinggal ikutin. Unfortunately nggak ada. Jadi make sure semua poinnya teraddress lah di dokumen ya. Misalnya nih, contoh prospek pendirian satuan pendidikan dari segi tata ruang. Ini saya bocoran aja ya. Coba aja Google. Ya, banyak sebenarnya ada sekolah yang mengupload di apa? Saya nggak tahu kenapa ya. Ada juga yang sebenarnya sekolah negeri atau sekolah madrasah. At least itu bisa jadi acuan Bapak Ibu untuk bikin sendiri. Ya harus dirubah lah ya sesuai konteks. Tapi kurang lebih nggak buta sama sekali. Ini bentuknya kayak apa sih gitu. Ada beberapa bisa dilihat di website. Mungkin sekolah lain ada ya sih yang memang bikin ya berdasarkan contoh-contoh. Kalau saya memang pakai waktu. Ini kan udah perpanjangan, kalau sekolah saya kan udah perpanjangan, jadi pakai memang yang format dulu gitu, paling tinggal diupdate aja lebih enak. Tapi mungkin untuk sekolah-sekolah baru nggak apa-apa dibikin aja. Nggak, kalau buat saya sih selama ke persyaratan undang-undang ada, masuk datanya yang diminta ada, itu biasanya nggak ditolak kok. Paling nanti during the process mereka akan kasih komen. Misalnya, oh ini nggak ada, ini tolong ditambahin ini. Jadi tinggal perfecting aja nantinya, gitu. Jadi nggak ada ya formatnya. Terus nomor 2, apabila semua prasyarat dipenuhi untuk pengajuan SPK, apakah ada perkiraan waktu izin dikeluarkan? Nggak ada, hanya Kemdikbud dan Tuhan yang tahu kapan mau dikeluarin izinnya. Karena terus terang aja, ada beberapa, jadi sekolah saya kan satu atap ya, itu baru SD yang dikeluarin perpanjangannya. Padahal sebenarnya izinnya tuh udah habis dari tahun lalu dan kita udah mulai ngajuin dari bulan Juli. Ya, padahal harusnya kalau dari undang-undang tuh 6 bulan sebelumnya tuh harus udah dikasih. Tapi kenyataannya udah habis izinnya, belum dikeluarin juga perpanjangannya, dan itu nggak cuma sekolah saya aja. Jadi banyak sekali yang sampai sekarang belum keluar. Jangankan izin baru, yang perpanjangan aja belum beres. Jadi Bapak Ibu mesti ngantri. Jadi mereka sekarang fokusnya ke perpanjangan dulu, karena memang saya mungkin bilangnya SPK batch pertama ya. Jadi benar-benar yang mengajukan di tahun 2014 itu izinnya tuh semua udah habis 2020 Bapak Ibu. Dan itu banyak sekali yang belum diperpanjang. Jadi fokusnya Kemdikbud sekarang adalah perpanjangan dulu. Jadi kalau yang udah ngajuin, Bapak Ibu saya tahu pasti udah banyak yang ngajuin. Kalau kok nggak keluar-keluar, ya memang ngantri. Jadi belum dikeluarin memang kalau untuk yang izin baru, jadi Bapak Ibu sabar aja. Kalau semua izin perpanjangan yang 2020-nya udah dikeluarin, baru mereka akan lihat izin-izin baru yang diajukan. Gitu. Jadi ya mumpung nih bisa konsultasi sama Ali banyak-banyak, kira-kira requirement-nya yang mesti dipenuhi apa aja, jadi pas siap keluar udah beres. Terus, apakah bisa di-share dokumen persyaratan akreditasi SPK? Bapak Ibu SPK aja dulu, satu-satu. Nanti malah pusing, SPK belum mau ngeliat dokumen akreditasinya, SPK aja dulu. Nanti kalau udah SPK, nanti Ali undang saya lagi buat akreditasi.
Siap.
Terus untuk mendapatkan akreditasi SPKA, apakah tipsnya? Ya itu sih kalau buat saya fokusnya kita nasional akreditasi, Bapak udah A, ajuin izin SPK-nya diterima, baru nanti akreditasi SPK. Karena akreditasi SPK itu nanti nggak langsung, jadi Bapak langsung SPK nggak berarti langsung akreditasi lagi, enggak. Minimal Bapak itu sudah meluluskan anak dengan program SPK, baru nanti akreditasi untuk perpanjangan izin.
Ya, Bu Haifa, dari tadi Bu Haifa udah ngomong, mungkin mau istirahat sebentar. Saya mau nambahin sedikit dari pertanyaannya tadi ya Bu ya. Kalau Bu Haifa mau minum dulu silakan.
Iya, saya minum dulu.
Silakan ya. So Bapak Ibu, I have more questions on the chat box. Yang pertama, ijazah apa saja yang diterima murid setelah lulus grade 12? Apakah diakui di luar negeri? Pak Suwono, on the chat box, I put the link, itu adalah list dari universities around the world yang mengaku ijazah A-level Pearson. Lalu ini ada hubungannya dengan pertanyaannya Pak Juli ya, ini is on the private chat Pak. Ini masalah kita bersama. Jadi graduates of SPK schools kan masih belum eligible ya ijazahnya untuk diakui di universitas negeri di Indonesia, gitu kan ya. Apakah ini masih kejadian? Apparently iya Pak, masih kejadian. Tapi kapan itu saya pernah browsing di UI ada program ya Pak ya yang mengakui sertifikat A-level. Untuk university lain sepertinya belum. Mungkin nanti Bu Eva bisa menambahkan. And then there is a question from Ibu Marilo. Hi Dr. Marilo, how are you? So you asked about Pearson Certification. Good news, we are actually working on that. Right now, we are almost in the final stage. Nanti kalau sudah done with everything, we're going to invite you again, school leaders, to hear our presentation about Pearson Certification Program. Okay, And then ini ada hubungannya dengan pertanyaan Pak Kris tadi ya, whether native should have TOEFL certificate ya. Nanti mungkin Ibu Ali bisa Bu Haifa bisa menambahkan soal itu. I guess that's it from me. Ibu Haifa, do you have any other addition?
Ini mungkin saya baca lagi, kayaknya ada yang belum ke ini semua ya kejawab.
Oke.
Dari Dwi Gamar Hadi Purwanto. Is it possible for newly established school to become SPK? Enggak. Ini salah satu discussion yang saya punya dengan Kemdikbud, karena untuk regulasi sekarang tidak dimungkinkan sekolah baru berdiri langsung SPK, itu nggak bisa, karena Permendikbudnya masih bilang harus akreditasi A dulu. Kan nggak mungkin ya sekolah baru langsung akreditasi A, nggak mungkin, karena harus punya lulusan dulu baru bisa akreditasi. Jadi jawabannya enggak, tapi ada kemungkinan kalau memang tahun ini jadi diganti ya Permendikbud 31-nya. Ini diskusinya udah 2 tahun sih, tapi nggak keluar-keluar. Mudah-mudahan sih memang perubahannya bisa dikeluarin tahun ini, karena banyak sekali yang mau langsung, karena secara karakteristik itu memang udah SPK, nggak mungkin nasional, tapi ya kalau dilihat dari regulasi sekarang itu belum memungkinkan.
By the way, Ibu Haifa, ini juga poin yang bagus. So, Pak siapa tadi yang nanya ya?
Siapa?
Pak Damar ya? Pak Dwi Gamar ya? Bapak mungkin lebih bagus juga kalau misalnya adopsi kurikulumnya dari sekarang, Pak. Jadi ketika sekolah sudah terbiasa dengan kurikulum internasional, nanti ketika sudah mendapat status SPK akan lebih gampang. Gitu ya, Bu ya. Karena basically kita melayani all kinds of school, Pak. SPK oke, yang akan menuju ke SPK juga oke. Ya. Nanti juga ada kaitannya dengan sesinya Oli ya, Ibu ya.
Iya,
Oliver ya.
Kayaknya lebih itu. Karena sebenarnya balik lagi mungkin nanti akan dieksplor sama Oliver lebih banyak ya. Harus tahu dulu motivasinya sebenarnya kenapa sih mau jadi SPK. Karena sebenarnya sekarang itu sudah banyak regulasi-regulasi yang tadinya eksklusif buat SPK doang, udah dikasih ke sekolah nasional. Contohnya bisa hire guru asing. Kalau dulu kan harus cuma guru bahasa ya, sekarang tuh udah enggak, udah beberapa posisi guru asing itu sekolah nasional udah boleh. Jadi ada beberapa hal yang harus dipikirin lebih matang lah, makanya buat saya planning itu penting banget. Ini juga ada pertanyaan, if some teachers have got the government teacher allowance, will it be stopped? Sayangnya sih memang meskipun terkesan sangat diskriminatif, memang aturannya saat ini begitu. Meskipun saya lewat Perkumpulan Sekolah SPK Indonesia masih melobi pemerintah untuk jangan sampai dicabut tunjangannya. Tapi sayangnya memang sampai hari ini itu masih dicabut. Tapi kita sudah sempat, so our lobby is actually partially successful, karena untuk guru yang bahasa Indonesia dan PKN itu masih dapat. Ya, jadi untuk yang, karena kalau guru agama itu nanti tunjangannya yang bayar Kemenak ya, bukan Kemdikbud. Jadi untuk yang bahasa Indonesia dan PKN itu masih dapat, tapi untuk yang subjek lain unfortunately enggak. Jadi ini harus dikomunikasikan ke gurunya ya. Jadi jangan sampai mereka nggak tahu apa-apa, kita ganti statusnya, tahu-tahu setelah itu mereka nggak dapat tunjangannya. Apakah itu akhirnya jadinya gajinya harus dinaikin? Ya saya serahin ke Bapak Ibu nantinya apakah mau diganti tunjangannya, karena kasihan juga ya, biar gimana itu privasinya mereka juga. Do we have to do dapodik? Iya dong. Semua sekolah yang ada di sini harus isi dapodik ya. Terus untuk English teacher dari Pak Kris lagi. Pak Kris lama-lama ini saya cas loh Pak, tanyanya banyak. Harus ada TF, iya dong, harus dong. Kalau enggak kualifikasinya dari mana? Kecuali dia mungkin yang native aja harus punya sertifikat, apalagi yang enggak. Nah, silahkan kontak Pak Ali untuk dapat certification-nya.
Yeah, so as soon as our certification program is done, we're going to have another event to update you with our services. Meanwhile, Bapak Ibu, I know most of you already, and we have been in contact already. Tapi kalau belum, so that's my number and also my email in the chat box. Okay. I think this is very interesting session ya, Bu Haifa. We have a lot of questions about this.
Gak apa-apa, nanti asal Ali mau undang-undang saya lagi, saya nggak masalah ada sesi
course.
ini. Ini saya ada 4 menit lagi sebelum saya hand it over to Oliver ya. Ijazah apa saja yang diterima murid setelah lulus grade 12? Apakah diakui? Tadi udah dijawab ya sama Ali ya.
Ya. Jadi sekali lagi Pak Dwi Galmar ya. Pak Suwano ya. So basically nanti kita akan mengeluarkan ijazah A-level. Jadi ijazah itu akan diakui di banyak sekali universities around the world. Yang listnya sudah saya sampaikan di chat box. Silakan diklik nanti itu ada in America, in UK, in London, in Japan, in so many countries Pak. Itu diakui ijazah A-level. Ya.
Ini saya terakhir ya. Terakhir aja ya, ini dari Pak Erik ya.
Bagus pertanyaannya.
What if SPK school wants to change to national school? What are the consequences? Boleh Bapak Ibu mau balik lagi, ternyata jadi SPK nggak enak, saya balik lagi. Boleh, ada juga di aturannya konsekuensinya apa ya. Pertama, namanya udah nggak SPK, izinnya dicabut, SPK-nya apa yang berkenaan dengan SPK jadinya ya memang tidak berlaku lagi ke Bapak Ibu. Sebenarnya sih secara konsekuensi dalam arti apakah izin saya dicabut terus saya tutup sekolah, enggak. Ini hanya status aja sih, dan silahkan berjalan dengan sekolah aja di sekolah nasional. Terus terang banyak sekolah, saya nggak mau mendisencourage Bapak Ibu ya, tapi terus terang banyak sekolah SPK itu yang memang sudah pindah lagi ke sekolah nasional atau mempertimbangkan untuk kembali lagi ke sekolah nasional. Balik lagi, makanya saya bilang planning, make sure you know what's ahead is really crucial. Jadi itu nanti akan dibahas.
Boleh di-share Bu, alasannya kenapa Bu sekolah-sekolah itu yang ingin revert back?
Berat. Jadi sekolah SPK tuh berat di requirement dan berat di ongkos. Jadi nanti
ini saya yakin walaupun nggak banyak kamera on, tapi pada ketawa pahit-pahit gitu ya Bu.
Iya. Ini kalau jadi
kata Pak Erik brutal Bu prosesnya.
Memang, apalagi yang udah tahu pasti tahu lah. Ini nanti saya bisa share, saya akan kirim ke Pak Ali ya ininya slides-nya. Jadi nanti biar Ali aja yang distribute ke peserta ya. Oke, so I hand it over to you Ali.
Thank you Ibu Haifa. Bapak Ibu, if you still have more questions, feel free to type it on the chat box or just forward it to me directly. So like Miss Pak Leo ya, Pak Leo Agustus, too many hoops to jump ya untuk menjadi sekolah SPK. Yes, correct. As a matter of fact, waktu akreditasi nasional itu saya dan Prasasti kami udah kayak jadi anggota sekolah gitu ya. Setiap hari kami kontak dengan sekolah tentang apa aja yang dibutuhkan dalam proses akreditasi itu. But for us, it's a worth it. It's a worthy process to actually grow together, yeah. Okay, thank you, Ibu Haifa. Now we have Oli. I think Oli is ready, right? So if Ibu Haifa, yeah, sure. Hi. If Ibu Haifa talked a lot about requirements to be SPK or just to be a better school in general, Oliver here will specifically talk about strategies. So I think it's going to be a very beneficial session also. By Oli. So Oli, please take it from here.
Thank you. I'll share my screen, then we're good to go. Afternoon, everyone. Just give me a quick thumbs up if you can see my screen and hear me loud and clear. Okay. Maaf ya, saya nggak lancar bahasa Indonesia, but I've already been here many years, so shame on me for not doing this in Indonesian, but I will do it in English. But I understand Bahasa, so if you want to ask a question, either type it or ask directly using Bahasa or English, I'll understand it. Plus Ali is here as well. So first of all, I have to say thank you to Ali and Prasasti at Pearson for asking us along. We love working with these guys, and we're always happy to share our experiences. Of course, Haifa at PSSE. And if you still want to become an SPK school after that, and all the hoops you have to jump through, we'll explore a bit about the motivations and the strategies in doing so, and then some of the processes to ensure success. So a bit about me, but not too much about me. I've been in Indonesia since 1998. I've been in education for 35 years. Within Indonesia, I used to run a group of international schools from across Southeast Asia, and we obviously compliance, licenses, regulations, SPK and iterations before SPK, and I'm extremely familiar with. And I do empathize with your frustrations, but regardless of where we operate, and whatever sector we operate in, compliance is something we have to do. Now I run my own company, Ask Consulting. We work not exclusively, but a lot of our clients are in the education space, formal education, so that's K to 12 schools, higher education, and informal education. We work with a lot of ed tech companies, and we support them with investment, divestment, so mergers and acquisitions, and strategies around becoming successful in those spheres. These are what we want to achieve today, but really in a nutshell, hopefully this is going to be a platform where you can get the feel of things you need to look at becoming an SPK school based on our experience, our industry best practice, and of course make some connections. You might learn something new. We'll hopefully give you a couple of frameworks to go away with. If you know everything that we speak about, fantastic. You're on the road to success. So a bit about rounding back to what Haifa said. Haifa was really looking at the preparation and the process, really top down, of becoming an SPK school, and a lot of those hoops you have to jump through. What we'll be looking at now is purely only the planning. And really understanding a few different issues around the context, around the industry, our motivations for becoming SPK school or not, and what we hopefully want to achieve in doing so. So, first thing, let me see if I can see the chat room. Your motivations for becoming an SPK school. I'd love to know. There are many. There are no right. There are no wrong. Please, the next minute or so, if you can drop your ideas in the chat box, and then I'll share with you what I've got. So just take a couple of minutes. You can either share with me privately. I do understand it can be a sensitive issue, or you can just drop your points generally in there. Why do you want your school to become SPK? Ali, I'm doing screen share at the moment, so as they come through, do you mind sharing them? I can't see the chat room.
Sure. Ibu Haifa actually gave a good start. So one of the motivation to be a SPK school is to increase school fees, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good. Any others?
Okay, to have a lot of varieties of materials and teaching method.
Yep.
That's a very nice answer.
Yep.
To be globally competitive. Okay.
Great.
Parents want that. Parents demand that.
Great.
Maybe also the reason to hire expatriates.
Yeah. Okay.
Expatriate teachers.
Okay. Well, let's stop it there, and let's see. Oh, there's more. Please keep coming.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to share with you what
students in pursuing continuing in foreign education.
Good one. Now I'm going to share with you what I put based on our industry knowledge for schools that we work with, why they choose or thinking to become SPK. And you know, you can, by the way, I'll share all of these slides with Ali, and he can share the entire deck, so don't feel you have to do screenshot or anything like that. But really just a few buckets here. You know, there's financial considerations, educational, operational, of course, issues related to the market and your growth as a school, and then personal issues, right? And you'll probably find that you can check or circle off several of these. You guys have already mentioned, you know, charge higher fees, of course, greater profit around that, better resource school, more pathways for our students. We'll touch on these points. Our stakeholders are asking for it. Another very strong one. It's interesting, no one mentioned the last one. My boss told me to do it, or the owner of the school wants to do it, which is perfectly valid. Okay, so, but these are common. And the point is that sometimes when you start in a new pathway for your business, because that's what your school is, a private school, you can feel isolated. And one of the big takeaways here, you shouldn't have to feel isolated. Your reasons for becoming SPK are very common. They're common to all these people, and we've just proved that as well. And also, I'll go on to show you that you don't have to be alone. In the private education world, you can often feel that you're doing everything by yourself, and you don't have enough resources to do it. And we'll walk you through some steps that there's a lot out there you can do yourself. You can ask for help for free, and some of it you may have to pay for, but there are a lot of options out there. So just moving on, preparing for the future, which is something no one actually perhaps had time to mention in the chat box, but we really need to future-proof our schools. And there's a great research paper, Schools of the Future, published by World Economic Forum. I'll share the link. There are two case studies from Indonesia. One is vocational education, and the other one is the Green School in Bali. And really this paper identifies 4 common keys to success, critical success criteria for schools of the future. And why am I mentioning this? Because this should be part of our motivation for becoming SPK. And they should also be part of our strategies going forward. And the first one is alignment to Education 4.0. I'm sure all the educators on and leaders on this call are aware of Education 4.0, 21st century skills, the role of technology and interpersonal skills within that. All of these are critical. Potential for scaling up. I assume everyone on this call is working or owning a school in Indonesia. So you are a business, and to be successful, you do need to have potential to scale your business, reach more people, and generate greater revenues and profits. Multiple stakeholder approaches. This is crucial in schools now. Voice and agency within the best schools are bywords for success, meaning everyone participates in relevant parts of developing the school. Everyone, not just the educators, also the students, the back office staff, the parents, other stakeholders, suppliers, board of governors that you may have within your school, and indeed inter-school within the broader network. And the last one, of course, it is the learner, and the students are at the center of everything we do. And we need to constantly position them as such, and really demonstrate improved learning outcomes. I will share the link for this document with everyone. I strongly suggest you have a read. So at this point, I just want to round back and identify that you don't need to be alone in this process. And I'll mention this at an early stage, and I won't come back to it again. The assumption being that if you want to add value to your school, and in this sense, we're talking about becoming an SPK school, you do it by yourselves. However, there are a number of different options out there to doing that. And the option on the far right, the social model, and the next one, the owner-operator, are really schools that are doing it by themselves. But there are other options out there. You can work with other schools. You can partner with them as a joint venture, franchise, and a management agreement. There are several other frameworks. And you can work with other schools who are familiar with working in the SPK territory, understand the compliance issues and the value add, and all the other issues that you brought up during Haifa's Q&A session there. You can reach out to me personally. I'm more than happy to make introductions to some of these other schools who may be interested in partnering you. I suggest you do that because at worst, it's a conversation. It gives you an education, and at best, you might get some value out of that. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so I just want to look very quickly at some of the opportunities out there as school operators, as school leaders and school owners. We need to be mindful of the landscape and position ourselves so that we get the most from our understanding of what's happening in the market. That means changing attitudes to education, the macroeconomics, what stakeholders want, what investors want as well. So I'm sharing 4 buckets with everyone, but don't worry, again, you can read this at your own time. I want to focus on 2 areas I think may resonate with you because they're certainly important to many of the schools we've worked from. And it comes back again to one of the motivations for becoming SPK school is about the price. And really that has to be one of your motivations because with greater price, you have more opportunity of improved resources, whether you employ different profile, some call it better teachers, whether you get better software for the kids, build a better school. So tremendous opportunities in terms of the macro in Indonesia and mobility of middle classes and their choice in education. And we've summarized some of the choices here that you can see, and your school is probably doing maybe all of these and perhaps even more, but these are the drivers for Indonesian markets and expats as well on their choices for schools now, and trading up. The ability to pay more means they'll probably choose a more expensive school with better options. And the other one is the disruption around learning itself. And as school operators and school owners, you will know that center-based learning, that means the traditional bricks and mortar of a school, that building itself is very different than it was 20 years ago, totally different than it was 50 years ago, and is going under massive change, massive disruption, particularly under COVID, with everything shifting to being forced to shift to offline. And we'll come back to this, but it's very important that we understand how the context of education is changing and how the choices of parents and their financial ability to pay is changing. And that should influence us strongly in our model of schooling and what we offer. So now let's move on from that. So we've looked really at some models of how we can be supportive. We looked at a bit about the context, and really the next stage is how to position ourselves. And for this, we're going to be looking at branding and marketing and why you should think very seriously about that as the first stage to absolutely everything you do if you're looking at changing your school model and adding value, and of course adding price, I guess, with more fees. So that's where we'll start. Then we'll move into the strategic planning. Then we'll move into some of the solid steps that you can take going forward. And at the end of that, hopefully we'll have time for some questions and answers. So first things first. the first thing I would encourage you to do, because we're not prescriptive or bureaucratic, but the first thing we would encourage you to do as a school looking to become SPK is understand the landscape, understand the landscape in which you operate. And there are 4 key components to that. First one is, of course, your context. And we had a quick look at that, and I suggest you can go back to it with the Schools of Tomorrow from the World Economic Forum. You know, what educational models is happening to education models now? How are they changing? How are they evolving? And how will that impact our brand? What are we doing about it? What are we, for example, what are we doing about blended learning? How are we expanding our service provision? What other things are we offering? How are we expanding our vertical? How are we moving from K to 12 into higher education or vocational education, or even professional qualifications and life skills around that? So you have to have an understanding of your context. Of course, as well, your company, your school, what is your special offering? How will that help us promote growth in relation to this context? All of these are interrelated. Of course, the customer, and we'll speak a little bit more about this, changing faces of parents and in particular learners as well, because learners are, as you know, are taking more ownership of their own education and the choices within that. And how is our school or your school positioning your customers and meeting their needs within that context? And finally, what are our competitors doing? Because something we need to be very mindful of, if you're moving into SPK territory, you're probably increasing your price point. So you'll be playing in, excuse me, a different segment of the market. And those guys at SPK have a lot of resources. They're very well experienced in that sector, and you will have to raise your game, meaning you will have to outperform your closest competitors. So you need to understand what they're doing. Now, this is what we need to look at. I'm going to share a little framework later on with how we do that. Again, understanding a bit more about our competition. Excuse me. I took 3 very different schools here, all of the same, very similar price point, a premium price point within Indonesia. Just took their logo, which is their key visual message, of course, the name of the school or the group. And really, if it's not their tagline, you could call that their value proposition. And you can see that all 3 of them, rightly or wrongly, position themselves in a positive, and of course there's negatives to that as well, position themselves in a certain way to appeal to certain market segments. For example, the first one, SPH, you can see very clearly it's a faith-based school, and that's where it positions itself visually and in terms of the messaging it gives. The British school, Jakarta, is a bit more internationally focused, perhaps a bit more exclusive in the way it's only a British curriculum, and ACG is a bit more holistic around that. So this is where, excuse me, for a starting point, you need to start having a close look at what your competitors are doing. The next one, after you've done that, is understanding your market segment. And this is crucial. And I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have done this. For your current market segments, I'd ask you a question: have you done it for your new segments? Because if you're becoming SPK school, if you're charging high fees, you'll be appealing to quite different segmentation. So you need to have a very clear idea of who they are. Why? Because you want to meet their needs and you want to communicate with them. Now, there's a few ways of doing this. You can either pay research and branding and marketing agency a big fee to do it for you. And if you've got the resources for that, fine, or you can do it yourselves. And there's pros and cons to doing that. And here is a very simple framework for identifying your segmentation, your customer segmentation. So based on demographics, their attitudes, key behaviors, and brand perceptions. So once we've done that, we then need to have a very deep understanding of the trends in education. Just as we mentioned earlier in that document, Education 4.0, Schools of Tomorrow, education is being disrupted. The bricks and mortar K-12 schools are being disrupted. Are we reacting to that disruption as a school, as an organization, or are we embracing it and staying ahead of it? I hope, I trust it's the latter. These are some basic ideas here. Everyone's aware about STEM, the role of digital technology, multiple stakeholder approaches as well. All of these will give you a deep understanding of where your business, your industry is heading. So now I'm going to pass it to you guys. I'll give you a couple of minutes about this. You've got the assumption being you've got a very clear understanding of the market in terms of the context, the changing face of education. You've got a clear understanding of your market segmentation. Who are going to be the new parents and students in your new, more expensive SPCAS school with these new program offerings in this great Pearson curriculum. So I'd like you to, just if you can, just write it on a piece of paper, do it in your head, and then we might be able to have a minute to share if anyone wants to share. See if you can formulate, write down, English or Bahasa, your marketing position and your key offering. What do we offer? Who is it for? What's the benefit? What are the reasons to believe? So I'll just give you a couple of minutes to do that. Any questions? Please put them in the chat box.
Right. So Oliver, I'm writing down the questions in the chat box. So what do we offer? What is it for? What kind of customers that the schools will have, right?
Yeah. So basically, you see the 4 questions on the screen. Yes. Just write down your answers and feel free. It'd be great if you could share your answers in the chat room.
I will be monitoring the chat room, Oliver. So Bapak Ibu, please do answer the questions on the screen. So what do we offer? Who is it for? And also what are the reasons to believe? Okay.
Yeah. And if you're ready, if you'd like to share, I mean, it's all about sharing. Just unmute yourself, and you can take a couple of seconds just to share before we move on.
Right. So I actually enable you to unmute yourself. So feel free to unmute yourself or to communicate via the chat box. Okay. Either way, I think it's a great questions, Oliver. For our reflections.
Yeah, exactly. This is a starting point to make you think, how well am I prepared for what comes next? Ali, as soon as comments appear in the chat box, do you mind sharing them, please?
Sure. Okay. The questions can be very, reflective, so it may take some time for the participants to answer.
No problem.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, just one more minute, because I do want to make enough time for questions at the end of this.
Yep. Or feel free to actually unmute yourself, Bapak Ibu. So if you want to talk to Oliver directly, and maybe we can have a short discussion, right?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
The question.
Okay. Hopefully you guys have at least had time to think about this, if not share anything. Does anyone have a burning desire to share with us? If not, we can just move on.
I actually have one answer, but the person has to be anonymous. So what
No
you offer is basically a curriculum that is different from the schools around the area. I guess that's the answer that I have. Yes.
Cool. Absolutely. That will be your point of difference. So really, and this is just to answer that, but this is probably warrants a completely separate discussion. There is a process you can go through to identify the areas of opportunity that you want to operate at. And one of those is, as you say, to identify a competitor analysis and see what type of program, curriculum you can offer that isn't being offered at a certain price point, meaning, you know, fee structure in your area. And perhaps that will give you an opportunity, a business opportunity, if there is a need for that, to offer that program in your school. So that's exactly right. So the purpose of this is really just to get us thinking. What are we going to offer and why are we going to offer it in that way? Now, the next part from there, because sometimes that can seem a little bit abstract in terms of thought process. And the next question that we always get from schools are, okay, what comes next? Well, what comes next is really the communications and the marketing strategies for the school. And there's a lot of commonalities in the education industry. There's a lot of the same things being done. There's some new things being done, sometimes successfully, but there's three key strands that we should constantly look at. That's the visual style of your brand and your brand story. Maybe you guys have gone through branding exercises and have all this prepared, but the visualization, the imagery of what you do has to be very clear. The messaging, of course, there's messaging in the visuals as well, but the words that you say, your brand promise, the value proposition or the proposition statement, aligning that to your target audience, the messaging, primary, secondary messages, the frequency of those messages, and the channel of those messages as well are all important things you need to look at. And the final one that is often overlooked is the customer journey. Now, the customer journey, even for your leads that haven't become customers yet, they're still at certain stage of this journey. And at every touch point, and those touch points being when they engage with your school or get an impression of your school, that can be a conversation with one of your staff, a chat with a parent, phone call with your head teacher, looking at your website, Google search, where you are on Google Maps, Google reviews, right through to the experience in the school itself, dealing with the teachers, dealing with the finance staff. It's usually a difficult one as well, right? All of these are your customer journey, and you need to understand in detail what is happening and the experience with each of the customers. Now, because of time, we can't go into any more detail of that, but as you are looking at becoming SPK, looking at providing more value to your school and charging a higher price point, these are issues you must look at. Why? Because your competitors are doing it. Some of them are doing it really well. If they're not doing it well, it's an opportunity for you to do it even better. So now we've finished with our positioning, our branding. We've funneled that into the marketing. So let's now look at how we put that together in terms of strategic and financial planning. So there are normally, from our experience, 4 key growth strategies that schools employ. And they're not right, they're not wrong. There are lots of subcategories in there, and you can share your own. You can write them in the chat box, and Ali can shout them out. But these are the ones that we identify. So, of course, driving the growth of the school, and that means integrating a new curriculum, for example, Pearson, getting a new school license, for example, SPK, charging higher fees, greater utilization rates, higher capacity, all of these important key operating metrics you need to address in order to have a successful school. The next one is improving organizational capacities. So that means, for example, your IT services, your IT provision, harmonizing your systems in the back office. So, for example, CRM, customer relations management system for your marketing and sales, an ERP for your finance, integrating those platforms, developing all your staff. So the first one looks at the school itself. The second one looks at the capacities for continued and future growth. The next one is expanding your service provision. Now, a lot of the better schools that we work with in Indonesia and the region, K-12 schools, aren't typical K-12 schools anymore. And I mentioned this earlier. They often build out their vertical, and their vertical meaning, for example, if they're a K-12 school, their students are obviously between kindergarten and grade 12, depending on which grade your kids graduate, grade 12 or 13. Building out the vertical, maybe they'll have daycare at a lower age, have that at different sites. Maybe they'll move into higher education. They may even move laterally into material supplies, book supplies, leasing facilities, educational technology platforms. These are all expansion of service provision that the better schools in Indonesia, and in fact the world, are doing right now. And I would strongly implore your school to look at that if you're not already. And finally, the other strategy for growth is, of course, organic, inorganic growth. Organic means you build new schools. Inorganic, you buy new schools or you partner with them. But it's the set idea of growth and scalability we looked at the beginning of this session. So now the priorities. Now we get to the nuts and bolts of making all of this happen, right? And there are really 3 key areas, and you can disagree with me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. 3 key areas that we put this in, and the first one is of course people. Education is built on trust. Trust is relational by its nature. Parents give us their kids to educate. What higher trust could we have behind that? And it's so in that sense, that trust is built on the people that deliver your program and support those people. Not necessarily the system or the IT system that you have, but your teachers in the classroom, your leaders that you have in the school, the board of governors, and your support staff behind them. So these are just a few ideas that you will need to look at with regards to setting your priorities around your people. One of the motivations was, we're becoming SPK school, we can hire expats. Absolutely fine. Hiring expats is a very different recruitment and retention and upskilling model and professional development than it might be recruiting other types of teacher. That's just fact of the matter, and something you must be aware of. Getting the best utilization out of your people. Are you deploying them appropriately? Do they have enough to do in your school? Are you not stretching them enough, or are you stretching your teachers and your employees too thin? All of these things you have to look at. The next is the product, and by the product I mean the program that you offer, not just the curriculum from Pearson or whoever else you may choose to work with, but all the other services around that. And remember, we looked at the schools for tomorrow and education 4.0, big ideas around that, not only the multi-stakeholder approach and development of learner outcomes, but also personalized learning. Students and parents have greater flexibility and choice, and therefore greater movement between schools than perhaps they did in the past. And so schools now, the better schools, need to address the individual needs of the learner and the parent. And finally, the place. And the place is in this sense, it's all about your facilities and what you've got and the utilization of those facilities. If you have a small piece of land with your school on it and a high number of students in it, you're probably using every square meter of school that you possibly can. If you're very lucky and you have a larger piece of land and not so many students, you might want to look at more inventive ways to actually use your facilities. So they're the three priorities that we normally strategically put our initiatives in: the people, primarily the educators, the product or the program, what we offer academically, and the place, our facilities. Now, in terms of process, there are really three clear processes, and one I believe Haifa touched on, and that's your school structure and the model that you operate your school. We looked at that earlier in that table. Is it social model school? Is it owner operator? Is it a joint venture? Management? It doesn't matter, but you will need to decide on that, because that will define the structure you have and the governance structure within your school. Strategic planning, we'll come to this shortly. I think the key here is simplicity wins. I know in this slide there's a lot of words, we're covering a lot of ground, but ultimately the message is clear: plan and plan appropriately, and that's it. Within strategic planning, we'll come to it, but behind that, we're all educators at heart. I'm an old teacher, but it's a business. Private schools are a business, and so finances and numbers need to be the beginning of every conversation that we have. And the last one, of course, is optimization of your excuse me, of your operations. Are you using all of your facility, all of your resources in the best possible way? All of your assets, whether that's an employee or it's your physical resources or the building or the land of the school itself, to ensure that you're getting the most out of them. Of course, you're not bleeding them, you're not bleeding the asset. You're just getting the most out. You're getting the most out of them as a school leader or a school owner. Now, I wanted to share this with you. Now, in the last slide, I said simplicity wins, and this here is quite a detailed one slide of a detailed strategic plan, and yours may not be as detailed as this. It doesn't matter. It could look very different. It could just be a narrative on a piece of paper. It's up to you. But really, you need these three pillars in all of your planning documentation: the strategic plan and the initiatives, the risk framework, and everything must be financially linked. I mean, if again, it's probably nothing new to most of you, but to others, this may be something new. So I'm just zooming in and zooming out here. So in this worksheet, there are the strategic objectives, the strategic initiatives. Very importantly, there's the risk framework. What happens if something goes wrong? What will be the consequences? What do we do to mitigate that risk? What will be the financial impact of this and how can we mitigate that? And what is the probability of that threat? So that's a very fancy way of saying, oh, what happens if something doesn't go right? We're just preparing for those eventualities. And finally, financially linked. Ebitda is just, it's earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization, as you may know. It's just an indicator for our financial health. You could have a rupiah number in there or some other profit and loss indicator, but you need to know, I would encourage you strongly that even though it's a school and we're dealing with the incredible privilege of educating students and impacting positively lives, there is a financial impact to everything we do in a school. And we need to understand that and take that seriously. So the final part of this is really putting that into action. And there are 6 areas here. And I'll go through these quickly because, again, you can read it in your own time. And then, you know, by all means, after that, you can direct a question to me and I don't mind answering that in your own free time. But business process mapping, you're probably familiar with what that is. It's really in the way of... Guys, can you put yourselves on mute if you're not contributing, please? We can hear some background noise.
Yes,
which is great.
Yep.
So really, the idea here is that your processes, your operations are formalized and systemized. Makes it very easy to scale. Opening a new branch, operational efficiencies can be dealt with very easily around that. Of course, leadership planning and succession planning, something you have to do, particularly if you're looking at hiring expat staff, because the expat staff typically, on average, will be with your school for 2 or 3 years before they move off to another career opportunity. So you have to look at that seriously. And of course, for your local staff, particularly if you want to scale up your business and open another school. Budgeting processes, we didn't really have too much time to speak about this, but cash flow projections, looking at your financial statements, balance sheet, income statement, cash flow statements, all of these things. As a board member, as a leader of the school, I would really hope you're having those conversations at least on a quarterly basis or even a monthly basis with your leadership teams in your schools. You'll have a pulse of what's going on. Again, it'll be linked to your strategic outputs and strategic initiatives. And of course, there's the old adage, you know, you can't manage what you can't measure. So if you're measuring something, particularly with financial data, it makes it a lot easier for you to manage your school and your organization. Cost control is another big one. Basically, education is a fixed cost business. We have high visibility of fees because fees are paid very early, up sometimes a year, 2, 3, 4 years, even 6 years in advance. And we can plan our costs, but some costs are quite difficult to control. I know that, teacher costs, payroll, utilization of staff. That again, that's a separate discussion. The final 2, program implementation. Again, this is the backbone of everything you do. Some of the areas we've touched already, but really ensuring that what you're delivering, what you promise in your branding and marketing is being delivered as a school. And you must have performance management mechanisms in place to ensure what you promise in your marketing is actually happening in the classroom. That sounds easy, but actually it's quite difficult. And the branding and the marketing, we address that in the first part of this discussion. So that's it. We've now got 15 minutes for Q&A. If there's no questions or everyone's feeling shy or tired, probably tired on a on a Friday afternoon and a bit Zoom weary. I know a lot of people get that way. I've prepared a few slides with common questions that we receive from our clients. But let me close this first of all, the screen share. And if anyone's got any questions, please share now, and I'll do my best to answer.
Yes, Oliver. So there is one good question, and I think that almost everyone here is having that question in their mind. So how to calculate the cost of a new SPK school from national school in your experience, so that it can be well prepared? It's a very good question, Bu Haifa. I think it represents most of us with that question.
Oh, that's from Bu Haifa, is it? Okay. Interesting.
Yes.
Well, this relates to the first part of the discussion that we just had, where we looked at the landscape where we operate. We do look at our competitor analysis, and from there we'll see what program we want to offer, not just curriculum-wise, but what value add will we give around that, what profile of teachers will we need to deliver that program, and all of these are cost issues, and more importantly than that, they're revenue issues. So if you understand the fees that you can charge and the revenue that you'll be generating, you'll then have a clear idea of how to manage your costs. Now, there are certain benchmarks, and I'll deal with the big one first, and that's your payroll, and particularly your teacher cost. And I can imagine everyone who's on this call is probably nodding their heads, and some people shaking their fist at how much they're paying on the payroll. But your target for your payroll, if at all possible, should be between 40 to 50% of gross revenue of school fees only. I'm not including any other revenue streams that you may have. If you can hit 40 to 50% of gross school fees as payroll, then you'll be in a very good position. I do know schools that exceed that greatly, sometimes 80 to 90%. And that is a risk that some schools take in the hope that they're going to ultimately get more students and generate more revenue. It's a very risky position to be in. I wouldn't encourage anyone to do it unless you have an incredible in-depth market study and incredible customer insights on doing that. So in terms of payroll, aim for what I just said, and there are frameworks and there's mechanisms to do that. If you're above that at the moment, don't worry. We can share frameworks with you to try and manage that, and it's more of a process than an overnight thing. Now, moving to other costs. Well, some of those are going to be fixed costs. If you're lucky enough to own your own land and building, fine. If you're leasing, that'll be a fixed cost, and you're going to have a long-term lease in place, as Haifa just said. I think she said 6 to 10 years or something. So that's a cost you can't change, right? Unless you're lucky enough to go back to your landlord and renegotiate. Other costs, student-related costs, industry standard around that is about 4 to 5% of gross revenue on school fees, not additional revenue, should be based on student resources. Marketing wise, it depends how you're marketing, but the most should be 5 to 6% of the gross revenue should go on your marketing. Yeah, I'm not giving you hard and fast numbers, right? Because I don't know what's in each school, but that's why I'm giving you percentages of gross revenue that are industry standards out there. When you get down to the more granular, the smaller costs, you'll have to identify those yourself. But there will be some hidden costs that you might not be aware of that you should be, particularly around employing expatriates, around obviously progressive tax rate will impact you there, visa costs, flights, bonuses, all those types of things. They're significant costs. The smaller ones in terms of upgrading the facilities, that will be your CapEx, your capital expenditure. so won't actually affect the valuation of your school, depending on how your financial wizards book it. But it's capex will not impact your EBITDA. But again, your competitor analysis and the understanding of your own facilities will give you a clear idea of what you want to invest in there, and as you build out your financial model. So I've shared a few of the big bucket items there in terms of percentage of gross revenue, but once you have a good understanding of your market, the position you want to occupy in that market, and the services and facilities and teachers that you have, you then need to build out a very detailed, normally a 10-year financial projection for doing that, which is basically the line items, your existing financial line items, and you just plug in, for example, extra teachers, the extra salaries of the teachers, extra resources, paying Pearson, which is very competitive compared to other companies like IB. You plug in all these costs, and you'll have a clear idea of how your finances look over the next few years. And I strongly encourage everyone to do that. So I hope, being in general terms, I hope that answers that question. If it's for individual schools, I'll drop my number with Ali, and you can send me a WhatsApp or an email, and I'll try and answer individually for each school, as long as it's not a complicated answer.
Yeah. Thank you, Ali. I think you can just leave your number in the chat box. And
sure.
Speaking of chat box, there's a very good question from Aan. What kind of risks do we need to consider in the context of schools becoming SPK? Then what kind of risk should we consider?
Well, the biggest one risk for me, and in my experience of the the strategic plan and strategic initiatives, the biggest risk comes in operationalizing that strategy. You know, there's a phrase in English, the devil's in the detail, which means, you know, you can plan all you want, but ultimately you have to do it. And if someone doesn't do it, that's the biggest risk, because it's not going to happen. So you have to to ameliorate or mitigate that risk, you have to ensure you've got a great team behind you to in order to execute, right? But more specifically with this question around SPK, I would say the biggest risk is you're going to be moving into a new market segment that you might not be aware of or have experience in. And you're going to, like any other business, if not just in education, if you move into that, you'll be dealing with operators who are experienced, as I mentioned earlier on. So ultimately, if you want to be the school of choice at your price point, you have to outperform the competitor schools in the areas that you've chosen strategically to position yourself. So if you say, okay, for example, we give the best A-level grades, Pearson A-level grades. That's all we focus on. We get, you know, grade 12, our kids graduate, they all get A stars or A pluses. So you have to ensure that you deliver on that and outperform every other school in your area in doing that. And that is the biggest risk. When you move into that new segment, you have to make sure you have that deep understanding of it in order to be able to compete, be successful, and more importantly, maintain that over time.
Okay. I think we have one more questions in the
Sure.
chat now. Also, this is a private chat. So this is a very nice question. So how to convince the steering committee, especially from a financial perspectives?
Okay.
Because, you know, most of the time schools are not supported by the steering committee.
So let me get it right. How to convince the steering committee or
school board
that you want to become SPK?
Yes.
So the easiest way, I don't know, I never worked with a steering committee, so I'm not really sure what that is. So I'll have to say a school board. So the owners, how to convince an owner of a school or Ketua Yayasan or someone like that.
Correct. Yes.
it depends obviously on the profile of that person, but I would like to think that school owners and board members are all intelligent and aware of educational output and process, and commercially aware as well. So that's a big assumption. If they're not, then completely disregard what I'm saying. But if they are, a surefire way to do that is normally to present a couple of options. And I guess I don't know everyone's situation. You could say, okay, if we stay in national school, we won't, for example, we won't be able to charge higher fees. We won't be able to resource our school anymore. So therefore, we won't be able to future-proof our school. So this model of school in its current form will probably die in a natural cycle of a business, over X amount of years, and say over 2 or 3 years, it will die. And then we'll be in a position of non-recovery. And dying schools are notoriously difficult to resuscitate and bring to life. So the other option you present with your market analysis, with your sector analysis, with your financial plan and your strategic plan, and saying, here is an alternative model for success. It will require this minimum investment, not just investment in terms of money, and hopefully it won't be much, but in terms of realignment of budgets, alignment of resources. We can charge this much extra revenue, generate this much in terms of profit, which can either go back into the school or, depending on the structure, go to your shareholders, whichever you prefer. So you present 2 well-educated, well-reasoned, well-researched and presented options. And maybe you just have to lay the facts out as they are. I'm not saying SPK is the way to go. It depends on your context. That's why we started, we prefaced everything with understanding your current situation. You may well look at it and say, we don't need to become SPK school. I know you have to speak.
Yeah. Sorry, I was actually paying attention to another question in the chat box, Ali. Am I breaking up, or is Ali breaking up?
Ali is breaking up.
Ali is breaking up. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a very comprehensive answer from Ali, even from the first question, right? About the financial, and then also about the risk. And then there is this question that perhaps Ibu Haifa can answer while waiting for Ali. So as mentioned, so one of the purposes to be SPK is to scale up, right? And that means to receive more, to be able to give more to the students, right? In terms of quality. Does scaling up mean that an SPK segment is dedicated for the upper level of the class economy? Oh, welcome back, Oli.
Sorry, I dropped out. I'm sorry about that.
No worries. No worries. We're still here.
Please repeat the question if it was addressed to me.
Yes. So basically, there is one question from I'm sorry, Paleo or Ibu Leo. Paleo, I think, yeah. So as mentioned, one of the purposes to be SPK is to scale up, right? To give more to the students and also to receive more from the students. Does scaling up means that SPK segment is only for the upper class of the economy? Will it be contradictory for SPK to aim for middle class as well?
I'm not the expert. I think Haifa is still on the call. You might want to address it to her, but I would hope. Now, let me answer right in my own way. That SPK is another iteration of the international school licensing, which international schools typically were premium, super premium price point, and then kind of national plus were in there as well, the kind of upper middle price points. Now SPK is kind of everything in that sector. So I would hope that the government supports that kind of licensing for every school who wants to offer something like Pearson or some value add and get the benefits of being SPK, regardless of the fees they offer. I would hope. But in reality, I think you'll have to ask Haifa if she wants to jump back on and answer that one.
Right. Ibu Haifa, are you still there?
Yep.
You are still there. Okay. So that is a very interesting question, right? Is SPK aiming only for the high level of social economy, or if you offer it to middle school class, will it be a contradictive? It's a very nice question.
Yeah. Well, actually, there's no regulation that SPK needs to cater certain segment or certain class. But unfortunately, over the years, because the requirements um, really put SPK in a tough position to be more affordable in a way, right? Because of this standard that they have to achieve. That's why I mentioned some of the SPK school was thinking on going back to national. And one of the reasons because it's not aligned with the school vision and mission. Because for instance, some school wants to basically provide good quality education to as many as possible, but because of the requirements that they have to meet, meaning they have to spend more money, and then by by nature, yayasan is a non-for-profit, meaning whatever they um, get in terms of fees, they need to reinvest again to the school, right? And then if they don't really have much, then it's going to be a struggle and it's going to be a challenge for them to basically put it back to the school and make sure that the school can meet that standard. So I will say it's not like that. I mean, it should not be offering only upper class. It should be affordable to as many as possible. But unfortunately, and this is something I also addressed to MOE, what actually their expectation about SPK, right? Because it seems like in their assumption, SPK is it's that rich community and it's for there are well resources in terms of also funding, meaning unlimited, but actually some is pretty limited. So again, it's the perception of an SPK school in the community. It's kind of really wrong in that sense. That's why the assumption being is for the upper class, while it's actually not. That's one of the reasons why some of the regulation seems to be really discriminative. Like for instance, this teacher allowance, the tunjangan, because they think that, SPK schools should afford paying high salary to the teachers, and then they should not be entitled for boss because they are well resources. So it's kind of a struggle for SPK to try to be as what they want to be in the beginning, if I put that sense correctly. For instance, one of the SPK school, okay, they are really one of the biggest SPK school in the country. They spend almost 1 billion rupiah only for accreditation. And that's basically burning money, right? Because they don't need that. They don't need to spend that money for accreditation. They actually can spend that money for something that is really developing the school. And that's pretty extreme case I put forward, but that's how it is. So it's not that SPK aiming for upper class, but sometimes they are in the position to be like that. Maybe that's something I can add on.
All right. I think this has been a very interesting afternoon session, right? Okay. We actually discussed a lot of things. In general, how to be a better school with more quality. Thank you, Oliver, for sharing. And then, of course, detailed presentation from your side, Ibu Haifa, about specifically being an SPK. And also in the presentation, I've mentioned some of the Pearson services that we can actually combine together, right, in the improving the school's quality, which in the end improving students' education quality as well. I will share these PowerPoint slides that Pauli and also Ibu Haifa shared earlier. And then I will also share the recording link for this meeting so that you can play the session again with your team. Maybe you highlight special session that you need. And that's it, I guess. So basically, Oliver, thank you so much for your sharing session. Very
My
useful.
pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very
Ibu
much
Haifa,
indeed.
thank you so much. Bapak Ibu, thank you so much for coming, and hopefully we can meet again in another business event in the spirit of always learning. Okay, thank you
You're
so much.
welcome,
And
Mr. Ali, Mr.
sure,
Oliver.
thank you, Pak. Okay, and have a nice rest of the day.